It's the girl with the short hair.
Okay, there's a little bit of music intro, just bear with it. Get into the music, man.
Yeah.
They said she was made of fire, and she said, I am quick to anger. But it is because all of the colors inside of me turn to rage when they are silenced. They said emotional dysregulation. And she said, my mood is a temperamental ocean, enormous and pulled in infinite directions. They said marked impulsivity, an inability to regulate responses to stimuli. And she said, when everything is an emergency, it is impossible to prepare for disaster. They said frequent suicide gestures. Gesture, as in the physicality of speech. Just as the poem demonstrates that which has no words, so do the injuries illustrate that which is unimaginable. They said a pattern of violent relationships, and she said, my ocean loves, just as deep as it hates. My ocean buries its history and vomits it up on the shore. The sea glass, soft as my apologies, they said, difficult to treat. She said, how do you disentangle the roots from a tree? How do you uncurl a bonsai from its contortions even when it knows it will not live long this way? How do you learn to stop hurting yourself when it is the closest you've come to being quiet? They call me borderline like an insult, but I know how it feels to be limitless. Women who feel in extremes are taught to be quiet about our grief, are taught control, contortion, a bonsai bent into impossible positions. The contortionist curls herself into a glass box. Look how small she can become. Watch how her bones turn to cartilage, and when she disappears entirely, all around the doctors gasp, as if they did not intend to make her this way. They call me borderline because I am the border between extremes. My highs are helium, my lows a skydive. The border lines that climb my skin speak of nights I did not know how to feel this much. This inhibition of my own grief. I curl myself into a glass box, but I do not fit. My ocean salt spills out around me. In 1993, Marsha Linehan develops dialectical behavior therapy as the radical acceptance of two extreme opposites. I'm learning how to feel without forcing myself to drown. So the poem I just read for you explores the symptoms of borderline personality disorder from a first-person perspective. It's rare that any mental illness is discussed from lived experience, but personality disorders carry a unique stigma. Stigma, a mark of disgrace or shame resulting from stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. For me, stigma was my teachers asking if I wanted to be treated differently when I disclosed my self-harm. It was my mother begging dozens of doctors for help, all of whom replied with, not to worry. I was simply being a typical moody teenage girl. It was silence, constant and threatening. A unique feature of the stigma associated with borderline personality disorder is that it is usually perpetuated by the people we turn to in our time of need. I want to tell you a story to illustrate how this clinician-led stigma impacted me. It was during one of my worst suicidal episodes when I took myself to the emergency room of the psychiatric hospital. I waited by myself for an hour before a nurse came to take my blood pressure. I waited for another 2 hours before a different nurse came to talk to me. She told me it would be another couple of hours before I was seen because they needed to triage. You see, even though a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder is an empirical predictor of suicide attempts, we are often taken less seriously in crisis due to the frequency of our ideation. I was angry, so I stood up and I left the hospital. No one tried to stop me. I walked slowly, hoping someone would follow me. My phone rang. I sent it to voicemail. A nurse told me I could call back and make an appointment for the next week. It is an acutely strange experience to be trained in suicide risk assessment and to experience a suicidal episode. It is an acutely invalidating experience to be able to assess your own risk better than those you turn to in your time of need. In that moment, I felt so completely alone. Suicidal episodes are very acute beings. Ideation, especially for those of us with suicidal histories, escalates to its maximum within hours. For this reason, timing is crucial to suicide prevention. Postponing crisis intervention by any number of days is essentially telling the suicidal patient, "We do not believe you." I will never know if my experience was in fact due to my diagnosis. My disorder often materializes in the form of identity disturbance. I frequently believe everything I do and say is a lie. I am often struck by the debilitating fear that my true identity will be discovered and everyone I turn to for support will leave. Even now, I catch myself believing I am fabricating this entire story. The identity disturbance of BPD has a favorite food. It's called self-stigma, and it happens when social stigma, for example, the commonly held belief that people with BPD are abusive and manipulative, becomes internalized by the person with mental illness. For me, self-stigma looks like believing I did not deserve care because I was falsifying my suicidal crisis for attention. In this cycle, self-stigma worsens the symptoms of mental illness. I am an honors psychology student working in a clinical psychology lab and planning on pursuing a graduate degree in clinical psychology. A professor once told my class that people with mental illness should not only keep this a secret, but should never study the illness or its related characteristics. I have been told by nearly every single person to keep my disorders a secret if I aspire to pursue a career in clinical psychology. The stigma ascribed to BPD and other personality disorders stems largely from its name. What do you think about when you hear the words personality and disorder? In my introductory clinical psych course, my classmates were shocked. "You can't say a person's inherent self is disordered," they said. "This is simply a result of the pathologizing of undesirable characteristics." They were suggesting abolishing the entire construct of personality disorders, and here I was, so many of my experiences shaped by the disorder of my personality. Were they saying none of what I had experienced was real? It is harmful to assert that psychological dysfunction is due to a person's inherent self, but it is harmful as well to ignore the unique and devastating consequences of chronic, pervasive psychiatric distress. How do we reconcile the two? How do we acknowledge the difficulty of treating such distress while maintaining the essential humanity of the patient? This is where the dimensional model of personality disorders enters the scene. Historically, psychologists have placed people into personality disorder categories based on a conglomeration of clinical traits. This is a breeding ground for stigma because it suggests we were born into this category and we will remain there forever. However, what we know about the humans is that we do not fit nicely into boxes. We change over time. We interact with our environment. I was not born borderline. I was born with a set of biological vulnerabilities that interacted with my experiences to shape my phenotype, borderline personality disorder. I want to tell you another story to illustrate what I mean by dimensional. Let's imagine emotional instability, a common trait that accompanies borderline personality disorder, as a range from 0, you're totally emotionally stable, to 100, you have absolutely no control over your emotions. So all the humans will fall somewhere on this range. In childhood, I was about a 25. My emotions were intense and difficult to control. I remember in the 5th grade, I threw myself face down on the snow because I got my first C+. Because it is difficult to raise a child with these reactions, my parents would frequently tell me to control my emotions. I had never been taught emotion regulation strategies, so I didn't know how to do this. Instead, I would experience shame, anger, and guilt whenever my emotions were overwhelming. These secondary emotions moved me up the scale of emotional instability to a 50. As I grew and my emotions grew alongside me, I never learned how to effectively regulate my responses. I began to self-harm because it did just that. It was something I could do to be quiet. When I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, my placement on the scale had risen above the clinical threshold, an arbitrary number that reflects difficulty in day-to-day functioning or extreme distress. I am part of the first generation of people with BPD who will achieve full symptom remission. That is to say, the skills taught in dialectical behavior therapy will help move us back down the scale to where we began, well below the clinical threshold. As I begin to lose parts of my disorder, I wonder who I am without it. I am not neurotypical, but I no longer fit into the category of borderline personality disorder. I am living proof of the dimensional model. If people like me who experience the pathological end of the continuum were viewed through a dimensional lens, we would not be borderlines. Instead, we would be people who do not have the resources to cope with our place on the continuum. If people with personality disorders were viewed as humans first and pathological second, doctors would not refuse to treat us. If a dimensional model existed, people exhibiting traits of BPD would not be denied proper treatment due to their clinicians' fear of marking their record with this stigma. Currently, the dimensional model of personality disorders exists in the appendix of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's only there if you know where to look for it. The categorical model is still the default, and it is not until we change this that we will overcome the stigma of personality disorders. It is not until we change this that we will be able to prevent the factors that led to me walking out of that waiting room. Thank you.
It's really hard to
It's a
follow.
poem from someone else. So the reason that it seems contradictory is because borderline people have all those different emotions going on at the same time, same as bipolar people do. And basically what she's saying is that she feels all emotions so deeply, like the highs, the lows, the depression, the anxiety, the need to kind of separate and disassociate, and things though become very, like we've talked about favorites before, Brett.
I don't remember, go on.
So a borderline usually has a favorite, which means that they find a person who, and it could change over time, or it could be a person that's there forever, depending on the person's life experiences and trust issues. So what happens is they kind of latch on, and it's not intentional. Sometimes here's another conflict. Sometimes it's not intentional. Sometimes it is, which is why people get frustrated because they can't understand the difference. So you need to be compassionate about that because they can't control it.
Yeah.
So when they do that, you have to set boundaries with them in the beginning and, say that, I'm here for you, but I can't be here for you 24/7, but as much as I can, I will be here for you. Well, if you start ignoring that person, not intentionally, but just you're busy or whatever, and it happens for a while, a couple of things can happen. They can feel like a disconnect from you and that fear of abandonment, which a lot of people have. And they can also self-harm, but that's not necessarily because of the non-contact with you, but it also could be. So in my relationship with my close friend who has it, I tell her that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and I understand why she does it, even though I don't do it. And I want her to always be honest with me and tell me when she does it and why. And if it is me, just tell me. And we have an honest, open communication about it. She also tells me when she's, struggling with dark thoughts and things. I reach out to her then. Yeah. So it's just compassion and understanding that any mental health struggle, and I hate saying what did she say? Disorder. I hate that. So I just say bipolar because it's not a disorder. It's not a label, and it doesn't define who you are, no matter what you have, even if it's just CPTSD, PTSD, anxiety, depression. The label does not. The label does this. It gives you a name for what you have, which gives you some peace of mind that you're not like insane or crazy, that it actually is there. But then being labeled as that and the stigma around it does not mean who you are. You define who you are.
Right.
So, and again with borderline, if you separate completely from them, to them it feels like losing a limb, literally, like an arm, a leg, a heart, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they can lash out at you. My friend does not do that, but every borderline presents in a different pattern. So it's not straight across the board, same as bipolar. There are different types, which we'll get into in the next one, after the second borderline. So I hope that explains that part of it, of the poetry of what she's saying, the back and forth and the love and the hate, and it's conflicting because it's happening at once.
Yeah, that's the thing, like with contradictory, I didn't mean, when I say contradiction, it's like, for me, I find a lot of my emotions and things contradictory. I find that humans, we are contradictory. We can feel love and hate at the same time. And, you know, it's like my picture, the yin and yang, but without the dots. It's very black and white, you know, and it's very, like for someone to go through whenever they're feeling, when you're feeling that extreme highs and them extreme lows, it's hard to, there's no balance, you know. And the silence that she was talking about is like, it's interesting because I can relate to the two contradictory things, the feelings, even things that I do, like I believe in one thing, but then I act another way. And about the silence, you know, that's relevant to CPTSD. Mm-hmm. And well, silence, I suppose, for anyone with any kind of mental health issues is, you know, there is even though I don't know, like you get some people who are confident and vocal, but there's still a silence there. But then you get very quiet people who are I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I think everyone has a silence in a way.
Yes,
you know? And everyone has.
They're not quite ready to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a silence, and it can be an inner silence, or it could be a literal silence reaction, or it could be not being able to speak to the right person, so that there's a silence there. There's not a sound, you know, or not being heard. You know, lack of expression or lack of people understanding. You know, so you feel that you're silent. You know?
Right. A lot of people, I would say pretty much everyone who's active in this group has major trust issues, abandonment issues. You know? And that also means, okay, they feel a sense of failure. So they feel like because they're always a failure, they're like, feel like they're lying and wearing a mask. Did you hear the part about the mask?
Yeah, I've felt that for years, absolute years. It's got better recently, but it's still there, and it still haunts me, you know? I feel
and
like
what I hate is when people force me into wearing a mask because I can't be around, like when there's such disassociation with my mother.
Yeah.
I have to wear a mask, and I don't like being put in that position because I don't like people who do that.
Yeah.
So that really sets me off, and it's a huge trigger, explosiveness.
Yeah, I feel like around everybody I know, you know, including all my family, for many years, and I haven't got the issue. I haven't got major issues with my family. There's a few in there, but nothing major, not compared to most people I talk to on here.
We've talked about that though, Brett. Validate your statement right now.
Go on.
That even though our experiences are different, it doesn't mean that our situation didn't affect us. We empathize with people who have it because we have a connection, and hearing other stories can help empower us and You know.
Oh no, yeah, I know mine's valid, but it's just I hear things where there's serious things in it. No, you're right. Mine's serious as well, but not quite the same as some of the things I hear. But nevertheless, right? Generally, I get on all right with my family, regardless. But being around them, I still have to wear a mask, and I sweat all the time anyway. So, and that becomes a lot more when I'm, when I'm around family and stuff like that. I feel a lot more, and that is where I feel like because I'm faking it so much, and I feel like they can see right through all the faking. And they can see right into me, and it feels to me as if they're thinking, why don't you stop being a dickhead and be yourself?
Yeah, and I really don't give a what they're thinking.
Yeah, trouble is I'm sensitive to it, so it really bothers me. I do feel like I'm living a lie, and I've done for years and years, but I don't know how to get out of that lie, and I don't know what the lie is.
The thing is what I just said. You're forced into the lie. It's not your choice. They're making you do that because they're causing your disassociation and your hypervigilance and all of that shit. So
I suppose the main lie really is that, it's complicated because the lie is to try and cover up the mess you feel inside. You feel such a wreck, right? And the whole life is a wreck. Nothing has gone according to plan. And so, but you still have to put on a smile and be a laugh and just try and be what you remember normal was, to be around.
Abnormal, you mean?
Be like, yeah, So I always feel like I'm faking it,
Absolutely,
Shivanna.
No, I feel that when it comes, it's a very hard thing to actually explain or to even verbalize, to even realize and recognize about the wearing a mask. Because there's I've heard about imposter syndrome, and I don't quite get it, or I don't know if I identify with it or what. But
I can tell you about that, but later if you want in detail. But go ahead.
And there is it's hard to be yourself when you don't even know who yourself or what yourself is, because you've got all these other voices in your head, from almost not like the voices in your head is like an echo of you're doing something, and then you hear what your mum would say, or you're hearing even people that you get on with, but you hear their criticisms, and then it's how can I be authentic when I don't even know who or what I should or what I like? Obviously I know what I like, but there's always a negative voice, And when it comes to being authentic and that, it's for me, when it comes to groups of people, I really struggle with groups and people. One part of me says that, in my head it's saying, I always talk about myself, I'm always talking about me, it's always, but then reality, back when I was little, the attention always was on me, being bullied and the abuse and stuff, so it's hard to navigate, how do I not be selfish? So then what do? I then become too caring in other ways, not verbally. Verbally I do still talk about myself a lot without meaning to, but then I'll become caring about others, trying not to be selfish. So it's a really difficult thing to, and what's real, do I, you have to stop and question your motives sometimes, because I've done things thinking it was caring, but actually it wasn't, it was controlling with a smile.
Right.
Well, I have good news for you. I think that is something that can be cured. And I learned a little bit about it from a toxic mental health group that I had to leave. One of the leaders had imposter syndrome, borderline, bipolar, and schizophrenia, which I can't even imagine. But the imposter syndrome, she wanted to know what it was. So I found the definition and I sent it to her. And I'm sure you've read the definition, right? Maybe.
I know what imposter syndrome is.
No, I'm asking Shivanna.
I will do. I don't know, I get confused a lot of the time, so yeah, I'll have to read.
Send you a link to it. And then what it is you feel like you're trying to accomplish everything, like in a, high manner, because you have, you want to do things the best that you can. And then you feel like you're failing at every single thing you do, and you're keeping up that mask. And really, that's living the lie. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll send you some TED Talks on it.
Yeah, cheers.
I find the best ones of those. That's what we're watching now. So yeah, I hope that helps explain that better to you. But it is something that you can overcome. And I'm not a therapist. And check with your doctors always. But the reason you can overcome it is by lowering what you're doing, your activities, right? Mm-hmm. And therefore able to give more than you would normally give to, say, 15 of them, cut it down to 5 maybe, and focus on those. And then that will help you feel more accomplished, which will hopefully take away some of the feeling of the failure and the lies. That would be my suggestion.
That's really hard. Like if you think of like somebody like Kim, for instance, who's like got the kids to look after, and she does it all on her own and trying to keep the house in order and everything like that. Where do you get that chance to break it down and slow down? That's
the tough part, is you got to find time. Like when the kids are at school, you got to maybe stop cleaning for a day and take time for yourself. It should be every day at some point.
If I stop cleaning for one day, well, you have to go to pot.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be for the whole day, but you can take when you start out with self-care and understanding that you need to change some certain things that you could improve, you don't say like, I'm going to take the whole day. So start out with 30 minutes of self-care where you do something, where you meditate, listen to music, do something that you enjoy. Even if you are not finding joy in it, maybe message a friend, have a video chat, or PM and text, take a bubble bath, play guitar, Brett, work on my book, poetry, whatever is going to keep you busy. And then as Stacy says, what does it take, Brett? 15 days or something, 30.
All right, so change a habit. It takes a certain amount of days to change a habit, right? Yeah.
Is it 30 or 15?
I'm not sure.
I've heard it's 21 days apparently. But whatever, I think everyone's days, different. Right.
Yeah.
So 21 days, that's a habit. So after you do the 30 minutes, you could either try to increase it to an hour, or you could do it smaller to 45. And then so on and so on and so on.
Can I interject here, right?
Yeah.
I'll say it properly. Can I butt in a minute? Right. If you, that's all well and good, and that does work for people. And I know it's a workable thing. I believe it is a workable thing, right? But I know in some people's cases, because I know I've been there so many times, right? Is that like, you can say, okay, right, I'm going to put the tools, and I'm going to take time for me now, right? And that's what I'm going to do, right? And then you take a bit of time for you, and you go into a slump where you get really, really tired, really burned out. It catches up on you, right? And you're absolutely exhausted, and then you can't get yourself together to do these things. So what you tend to do is, once you start doing little bits, and it builds up, and you're clearing up, and you're doing all the things that you need to do. And while something, adrenaline or something, is keeping you going, you keep going while you can, because you know if you stop, you might not get going again, and the whole place goes bang. So, right?
All right. How about this then? Instead of the 30 minutes at a time, start with 5, 10, 15, and go like that. And whether it's putting away some dishes, Kim, or whatever makes you feel like you accomplished something. Like, Brett, I'm terrible at this. I cannot make my bed because it is a California king size bed with, like, I can't do it with my pain.
Yeah, I know.
So I don't do that. I don't eat breakfast, but that's because of my 28 meds a day to stay stable. I usually get hungry pretty late at night. I have trouble sleeping and stuff. So it's hard for me to find time, and I am one of you, and I need to practice this too.
I was just going to say, if you're going to talk, like, if you're talking about habits, right?
Yeah.
I find that sometimes there's too much time in the world, and then other times there's not enough time in the world, and it's, for me, there's like life quite unbalanced like that.
Thanks so much for listening to our podcasts. Please like and subscribe for new content as it comes out. The links to support groups are in the descriptions under all of our uploads. We have regular live group chats and support each other, and we can vent when we need to. And please remember, practice setting boundaries, using grounding techniques, and know that self-care is not selfish.